ਗੁੱਡ ਮਾਰਨਿੰਗ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਕੰਸਰਨ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਵਕਤ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਡੀਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਏ, ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਸਖਤ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਤਾਂ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ। ਜੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਸਖਤ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਰ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਉੱਠਦੇ ਨੇ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਦੇ, ਪ੍ਰਾਈਵੇਸੀ ਦੇ, ਫਰੀਡਮ ਆਫ ਐਕਸਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਵੈਲਿਊਜ਼ ਨੇ, ਚਾਰਟਰ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਚਾਲੇ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਫਸਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ। ਜੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਨਰਮ ਰੱਖੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਲਾਅ ਇਨਫੋਰਸਮੈਂਟ ਏਜੰਸੀਜ਼ ਕੋਲ ਇਨਫ ਟੂਲਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਉਨੀ ਸਖਤੀ ਨਾਲ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੜ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ। ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਖਤ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਣਾਏ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸਿਓਂ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਉੱਠਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਅਸਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਹੈ ਜਿਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਸ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਕਈ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਣਾਏ ਨੇ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਣਾਏ, ਪਰ ਹੁਣ ਬਣਾਏ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਟਿਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਵੀ ਹੋਈ। ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਨੇ ਕਈ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਵੀ ਰੇਜ਼ ਕੀਤੇ ਨੇ। ਕੁਛ ਗੱਲਾਂ 'ਚ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਨੇ ਕੋਆਪਰੇਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ, ਕੁਛ ਗੱਲਾਂ 'ਚ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਨੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕੌਨਟੈਕਸਟ 'ਚ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਤੋਂ MP ਲੈਰੀ ਬਰੋਕ ਨੇ। MP ਲੈਰੀ ਬਰੋਕ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਟਫਰਡ, ਬ੍ਰਾਂਟ ਸਾਊਥ ਅਤੇ ਸਿਕਸ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਲੈਰੀ, ਵੈਲਕਮ ਐਂਡ ਥੈਂਕਸ ਫॉर ਜੁਆਇਨਿੰਗ।
Yes, thanks for having me.
Larry, crime is a top concern for many Canadians, and your party has been critical of the government's approach. So in simple terms, what's the biggest difference between a conservative approach to crime and the federal's approach?
Well, it's quite fundamental, and I think your listeners really need to hear this. For the last 11 years, this Liberal government has prioritized the comfort and the security and the freedom of criminals, violent, dangerous criminals, over that of keeping communities and victims safe. The number one responsibility of any federal government is to keep us safe. When I go on a listening tour in town halls from coast to coast to coast, I hear this repeatedly. Why are the Liberals not getting this? Why are they not making this their number one priority? And I say, you know what? This is not a partisan issue. Regardless of your political affiliation, everyone wants to raise a family and live in a peaceful law and order community. But the Liberals have chosen over the last 11 years, they have chosen to let violent, dangerous, repeat offenders to roam free rather than protect innocent Canadians by repeatedly refusing to introduce appropriate legislation that prioritizes community safety, or they routinely vote down conservative solutions. In the last parliament, this parliament, I should say, we have introduced close to 20 private member bills, justice-related private member bills that would have enhanced community safety, and all but 3 of them were routinely voted down by this Liberal government. It's absolutely shameful.
But the Liberals said government recently changed Canada's bail laws through Bill C-14. So from your perspective, what are those changes still missing, and what would the conservative government would do differently?
Right. That's a great question. And I know that a couple of weeks ago, you had the Secretary of State for Combating Crime, MP Sahota, on your show, and I'm sure she was touting the successes that Canadians can see through the passage of Bill C-14 and the Bill C-16. I know Prime Minister Carney is doing the same thing, and so is the Justice Minister, Sean Fraser. The problem is this is all a smokescreen. This is an illusion. This is an attempt by this Liberal government to pacify Canadians that they are finally understanding the need for community safety and to keep violent offenders off our streets. The problem is, it's a great question. The problem is they simply scratch at the surface. C-14 has preserved The number one reason that communities are under siege right now with this catch and release mentality where police are doing the right job, making the arrests, and only seeing literally minutes or hours later these dangerous repeat offenders being released on bail. That is a result of the passage of Bill C-75 in 2019, which introduced the principle of restraint, which requires judges every single day of the year to prioritize the release of criminals over community safety. C-14 preserves that principle of restraint. We fought to remove that, or we fought to amend that to prioritize community and victim safety when you're dealing with repeat criminals, and that was voted down by this Liberal government. So C-14 moves the needle ever so slowly into the appropriate direction, but it doesn't go far enough, and we are going to see more of the same. Just take a look at what's happening in the last couple of weeks in the GTA. The number of serious violent crimes with offenders being already on releases. That one case involving the nightclub shooting, that person was awaiting sentencing for a very serious home invasion involving torturing an individual, and he just brazenly went into a nightclub and shot away, then literally carjacked a vehicle with people inside and mowing down pedestrians. If this Liberal government was really sincere about protecting Canadians, they would have accepted and voted in favor of my colleague MP Arpancana from Woodstock's Jail Not Bail Act. Had that particular act been in law, that individual would not be released.
Larry, I think we all agree that many repeat offenders commit new crimes while out on bail. But the problem is Canada has the Charter of Rights and independent judiciary and due process. So within those limits, how would you keep dangerous repeat offenders off the street?
Fantastic question, because the Charter, and I'm a former Crown attorney, so I've been dealing with these issues for the better part of 2.5 decades. The Charter provides for the right to reasonable bail. That is not to be confused with absolute bail. And because of Bill C-75 and because of Bill C-14 not doing enough to direct judges to appropriately detain these violent repeat criminals, we are going to have more problems and more cases that I just described to you on our streets. So we have the tools. Long before 75 was introduced, the Criminal Code of Canada had the appropriate tools already baked into our bail provisions, that a Crown could oppose the release of an accused depending on the circumstances, either on the primary grounds, the secondary grounds, or the tertiary grounds. When I was in the trenches, when I was in bail court prosecuting these cases, prior to 2019 and the passage of Bill C-75, violent repeat criminals were routinely being denied bail on the basis of concerns on any of those three grounds. But because of the principle of restraint, it literally overrode those three particular provisions in the criminal code, which has allowed judges and justices of the peace to rely upon that presumption of release.
And let's move on to another major concern, organized crime.
Yes.
So what would the Conservative government do differently to tackle organized crime, especially when prosecutions and deportations take years because of legal appeals?
Well, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. This is a requirement that the federal government must be working with the provincial governments to ensure that there's more funding available for law enforcement. Let's remember, this Liberal government under Carney promised Canadians and repeated this promise repeatedly at least a dozen times since the last election in 2025 to hire more police officers. Well, where are the numbers? Where are those officers? They promised 1,000 new CBSA agents on our borders. far as I'm concerned, not one has been hired. In fact, our public safety minister, Gary Andasanger, he said it wasn't his responsibility to hire. Well, if it's not his responsibility, who is it? So we would have done things differently. We would have put action towards our announcement. This Carney Liberal government is very good at making an announcement. We often say they get an A in making an announcements and an F in follow through. Our approach would be different. We would say, yes, we need additional resources, find the money, deploy those resources, hire the officers, work with the provinces to hire more Crown attorneys, more specialized Crown attorneys, ensure that we have a sufficient quantity of judges, whether they be federal judges or provincial judges. Right now we have several dozens of vacancies at the federal level, making sure the provinces are keeping up with hiring judges, improving our infrastructure, ensuring that courtrooms are designed and have all the technology to deal with the challenges of organized crime. So it's a joint effort that requires action, not simply announcements, but rather action. Right now, our criminal justice system is still recovering from the impact of the pandemic. We need to improve on that.
Well, Larry, when we talk about crime, illegal guns are a major challenge. So what specific steps would a conservative government take to stop gun smuggling that you believe the current government hasn't?
Well, I kind of touched upon that in my last response. Where are the 1,000 new CBSA agents? Where is the technology that they promised that they would deploy to the front lines, particularly our ports? It's a really sad statement that Canada, being a leader on the world stage, a proud member of the G7, only inspects 1% of all the shipping boats that arrive at the port of Vancouver. 1%. That allows fentanyl, that allows precursors for chemicals, that allows smuggling, that allows weapon smuggling, trafficking. It allows all kinds of nefarious activities and product from entering our country. If we deployed additional resources and the technology and made it a priority to exercise that number one responsibility to keep Canadians safe, we wouldn't be in the mess we are today.
Larry, this is my last question, and this is big Canadian dilemma. Canadians want tougher laws, but they also value human rights, charter, and judicial independence. So how do you strike that balance, being tough on crime without compromising the rights and freedoms that define Canada?
Well, that was the approach that Prime Minister Stephen Harper took during his 10 years in power. We adopted a tough on crime agenda. Yes, there were many cases where laws were struck down as being unconstitutional, but there were several laws that were still in place when Justin Trudeau formed government in 2015 that passed constitutional review, that were still the law in place in Canada. And over the last 11 years, this government has slowly dismantled all of that particular tough on crime agenda, which has made this a mockery. Our criminal justice system is a mockery. Violent criminals, organized crime entities, gangs, etc., are laughing at this current government because they've made it so accessible for them to continue preying on vulnerable communities and vulnerable victims because there are next to no consequences in our criminal justice system. C-16, a classic example, they have now allowed judges to undercut mandatory minimum penalties on their own or by application of a court. So, for instance, a 1-year mandatory minimum penalty can now be reduced to a 1-day sentence. Where is the justice in that? This Liberal government, again, continues to prioritize the rights of criminals over that of community and victim safety, and that is a shameful statement.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for your time as well. Have a great day.
So, Larry Brock, MP ने, कंजर्वेटिव MP ने, Brantford ਬ੍ਰੈਂਟ ਸਾਊਥ ਅਤੇ ਸਿਕਸ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਮਾਮਲੇ 'ਚ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਕ੍ਰਿਟੀਸਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਦੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਔਰ ਇਹ ਅਸਲ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡੀ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਡੀਲ ਕਰਨਾ। ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਜਾਂ ਲਾਜ਼ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਸਖਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਉੱਠਦੇ ਨੇ ਕੋਰਟ ਚੈਲੰਜਸ ਦੇ, ਚਾਰਟਰ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਦੇ ਅਤੇ ਫਰੀਡਮ ਆਫ ਐਕਸਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ, ਪ੍ਰਾਈਵੇਸੀ ਦੇ। ਅਤੇ ਜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ 'ਚ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੋਫਟ ਲੀਨੀਅੰਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ। ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਹੁਤ ਨਰਮ ਨੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਡੀਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ। ਸੋ ਇੱਕ ਅਸਲ ਦੇ 'ਚ ਵੱਡੀ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਰਾਈਟ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਬੈਲੈਂਸਡ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਦੋਵੇਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਰੱਖੀਏ। ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਅਸਲ 'ਚ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਚਾਹੇ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਤੋਂ, ਚਾਹੇ ਅਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੋਰ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ, ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਅਟੈਂਪਟ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੋਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਚਾਲੇ ਇੱਕ ਬੈਲੈਂਸਡ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ।